Last year, I converted a repulsor executioner into a remote-controlled flying destructional vehicle of doom. And in order to do that again, I'm going to do that this time, but with a fish. A communistic fish from the Tau. This is called the devilfish from the Tau Empire. And basically, it's essentially flown by two little drones that I'm gonna pretend are actually the motors. Let's just pretend that the motors on the side are just for carrying lunch, because you can't make it fly like that. I'm not a spaceman, and so this is just how I'm gonna make mine fly. Basically, what I'm gonna do is keep with the theme of Tau and convert the whole bloody thing into just one big drone. I feel like that's very fitting for the situation. As you can tell, you need to have the model if you're gonna be able to do this, and I already built this. Mostly. I didn't glue everything, but I glued quite a lot of this stuff together, enough for me to start making some modifications. Once I've checked the placement of everything and I'm kind of satisfied, I'm gonna start cutting. One thing I have a rule on though is I don't like to measure, and most of the time whenever I measure things go wrong, but in this build I was gonna have to do probably a little bit of measuring if I was gonna make sure things were gonna fit right. What you can see me doing now, however, is removing as much of the plastic as I possibly can. This is because I need to make this thing as light as possible. A little trick when you're working with plastics, however, which has been told by many YouTubers, but in case you're wondering what I was doing, a very Tamiya glue stuff. If you paint it over bird edges, it melts away the plastic and makes it look like you did some work, even though you didn't actually do work. What I'm doing currently is measuring the space that I feel like the motors can fit in. And with those measurements, I move over to Tinkercad and quickly whip up a couple of little discs that fit into the perfect spaces that Games Workshop left in the model for me to mount motors to. Once I've got the model that I need, I just send it off to the Bamboo Labs, a Carbon X1, which I printed in carbon PLA. And then once I had pulled these off of the printer, it was time to glue them into the model. This part is the easy part. All I had to do was make a couple little discs and stick them into their place. That's pretty simple if you ask me. I think anybody could maybe do that, maybe not, I don't really know, but this was genuinely the easiest part. Although I did make a pretty severe mistake, which we will get back to once I have found the right screws that I need to put the motors in, because motors like this are a little bit funny with the size screws that they need, and they all need to not touch the windings, but also go all the way through at least enough to hold the motor in place. Otherwise the vibrations will just shake the motor right off of the aircraft. And now the motors that I'm using are gnarly FPV 1203, and I'm pretty sure they were 7,000 kVs. I can't be totally honest, my eyesight's really not that good anymore, and I can't remember, and I've already painted over them, so I can't even look. At this point, I realized the severe mistake that I had made in my design for these little discs, and I needed to drill a hole in the center because there is a little shaft in the middle of the motor that needs to spin freely in the center, and I can't believe after all these years of making motor things that I forgot about that little shaft, but not to worry, a drill makes short work of that. And to complete the front motor mounting situation, I just dremeled out the inside of the drones and I glued them on top of the motors once I had screwed them in place. Also, I had to dremel out a little bit of space for the cables that went through. Originally, I was going to keep some LEDs on these motors that were on them from the original drones, but realistically, it was just going to be such a nightmare, so I gave up on that idea. Really, it's going to fly, that's good enough. I can add LEDs later if I really want to. I also decided that there was absolutely no way to mount the motors on the back in a very stable enough way. The thing with drones is that they have a little system inside. It's a flight controller, and this thing builds up errors very quickly. I'm not using any flight controlling nothing, but these, even on the most simplest settings, they build up errors and cause funny oscillations which end up crashing your drones. So I decided to use a carbon frame which I had cut off of another drone, and I cut it in half and glued it in place. I also cut half the machine part, but don't worry about that. Also, because of putting this frame, those side engines didn't fit anymore, and so I had to cut off the little tabs on the side of the body. As I was putting on the propellers, or at least thinking about putting them on, it was at this point that I realized the motors would have then made the propellers smack the bottom of it, and it wasn't working. I needed to put some spaces, which I very quickly made up in Tinkercad and printed out again, and then stuck them between the motor and the frame that I had glued onto the inside of this aircraft. And now I can put the propellers on, and it wasn't going to smash all over the bottom of the drone itself. This is also a point when I had screwed the flight controller onto the inside of the frame, and because it was already a frame, there was already easy enough space for me to just screw the flight controller in as if it was a normal drone. And it's already starting to look like some kind of machine, which I'm pretty happy with. I'm sure that the space communists would be happy too. This is the receiver that I'm using, and it is not necessary to have such a monstrous receiver, but it's a really good brand from Team Black Sheep, and it means that I'm running Crossfire, which the main reason I run is because of its reliability as well as the size of the receiver. It's so small, and I've used one of these in many of my builds so far, and it really is helpful to me as a small micro builder to be using small receivers. You saw me already solder up everything that I needed, including the motors and the receiver to the flight controller. It's now time to plug this into a computer, and there's something super surreal about plugging your Warhammer model into the computer to make sure that motors work and that the freaking flight controller is in the right direction and all of that. Basically what you see in the background is the software that is controlling the flight controller. There needs to be some kind of software that tells the motors when to spin up and when to spin down. There is absolutely no stabilization in it at all. This is the Tau Devilfish test number 1. If this explodes now, the whole video is just gonna go in the bin.
Oh my god!
It's got so much power, bro!
Dude, it looks so
Let's
cool.
put the wings on the back and see if it takes off. I needed to put a little pippy here because, do you know what I mean? Maybe I should just tape them on. A Tau Devilfish with its big bum engines on, a test number 1, but it's test 2. Oh. They're already settled now. Just kill us both. Also, I'm gonna have to take off and nose in.
Oh, nose in. You better have had a bit of line of sight practice.
I haven't been practicing nothing, George. I sent off the spare drones to Lucas over at the Squid Boy channel, and he painted them very fantastically for me in exchange for a couple of cookies. It was a weird exchange, I must admit, but he did a fantastic job, and then I tried to match that paint job on my drone Tau Devilfish thing, and once I was kind of sort of satisfied, I started painting a little bit of the blending things he did, and then I said, do you know what, Lucas? You hate me for doing that, and I am not going to hate you for that, and I'm just going to leave one done. One is good enough, and that is where I called this model done, and I'm going to leave you with some glorious flight video footages that was taken by my friend George. I'm not gonna lie, these videos cost me an absolute fortune to make, and in reality I have not once gotten a sponsor on any of these videos except for the one which did extremely badly, meaning that no sponsors wanted to sponsor these videos again, so there's that. But I hope that you enjoyed this video at least. There might be quite a long wait between now and the next remote control conversion because of the aforementioned words that I had said out of my mouth. this is a good time for me to say very much thank you to my patrons, because genuinely, without the patrons, I was not going to be able to afford any of this video, and it's because of them that I was able to explore a slightly different avenue in my hobbies, and I really do appreciate them for supporting me even when I do go off the rails. This is also another good time for me to say that you should leave some words in the little square box down below, because that helps YouTube to decipher whether they like this video and will share it with more people. Speaking of sharing, share this video with your gran. It is now time for me to tell you that if you don't like this video, I actually don't care, and you can kindly now f*** off.